Can you see my face? Well,
Hello, everyone. We'll give just another minute. Looks like there are a lot of attendees still joining. All right, well, let's get started. Hello, everyone, again. My name is Priya Bhutani. Thank you for joining us today. The goal for today's discussion is to give you an overview of some of the recent regulatory changes that have taken place in South Korea, and we're talking as recent as this month, July. For those of you who may not be familiar with our company, RegDesk, we are a platform, a software solution that automates the pre-market approval process for medical device companies. So think of everything from the ability to get checklist requirements per country to being able to then prepare those applications faster, being able to track those, and then the most important things, reportability and measuring your key KPIs. We are a trusted regulatory intelligence platform for many leading medtech companies around the world. We're happy to discuss offline how medtech companies are using AI and machine learning in regulatory to get and stay ahead. With us today, we have a leading expert from South Korea, Mr. Vincent Choi. Mr. Choi has over a decade of experience in regulatory affairs. He's held managerial roles at various leading medical device companies in Korea. Mr. Choi has extensive experience working with MFDS, the agency in South Korea, to obtain product approval for not only medical devices, but also veterinary products. He has led several internal audits, resolved licensing issues, corresponded with foreign manufacturers and distributors in the US, EU, Asia, and East Africa. In addition, Mr. Choi has assisted companies in obtaining HIRA code for reimbursement. He's also certified ISO 9001 auditor. Before we begin our discussion this morning, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Thank you again for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we'll be holding a brief Q&A. This is only a 30-minute webinar, so it'll go fairly quickly. So we encourage your participation. Please refer to the chat button on your screen. In the interest of time, please submit your questions throughout the course of this conversation, and we'll try to address as many of your questions as we can. And if we cannot, please feel free to email us your questions, and we'll try to get back to you with an answer. Also, we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar and ideas you may have for future webinar topics. We'll send a short survey post-webinar. Would love your feedback, as I said. So without further ado, Mr. Choi, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you here today. So let's dig right into the changes. As we understand, there are some changes that went into effect as of July 1st. Can you tell us about these new updates? What's changed? What do we need to know about these recent changes?
yes. On July 1st, the MFDS has made it mandatory for medical devices companies to provide medical devices UDI code. The MFDS has established an integrated online information system. They opened the system on July 21st for medical devices manufacturers and importers to attach the UDI code for products that have been imported on or after July 1st, 2019. That's it.
And is that the only change that's there, or is there?
There's another change, and there's another issue, and all of the Korean medical devices companies, such as manufacturers and importers, have to follow the new ISO system
Which ISO standard is this?
The ISO 13485 2016 version. So all of the company have to convert from old version to new to new version. So this is very important, and the manufacturers and importers have to combat these changes.
So if I understand correctly, just to summarize, there are two new recent changes. The first one is MFDS has developed and created this computer system. It's used to input UDI information. So it's a UDI information, integrated information system. And if we understand correctly, the system actually opened up on July 24th, and it now requires that all medical device manufacturers and importers, before they import their products into Korea, they must provide and submit UDI code information into the system. And without it, then we'll discuss the impact of not doing this step. And the second change is that all manufacturers now must comply with the latest version of ISO 13485 in relation to the QMS system. And except for class 1 devices, you said, right? Because class 2, 3, 4 need QMS, class 1 does not. So manufacturers that do not comply with the latest ISO 13485 will not get approval. Right, okay. So moving on, what types of products or risk classes are going to be affected? And let's talk about, so we understand for the change related to ISO 13485 that relates to all manufacturers except for class 1. But then for the UDI code, is this new change for all risk classes, or which ones are being impacted this year?
Yes. In Korea, medical devices are classified into 4 main risk-based classes: class 1, 2, 3, 4. And the current rule of providing the UDI code information only applies to the highest risk class 4. Next year, the same rule would be applied to class 3 medical devices, followed by class 2 in 2021, and then finally class 1 in 2022. The class 1 is optional.
Okay.
No. It's yes.
So it only for this year, only the UDI code system is only related, or it only impacts class 4 devices, so high risk classes. So yes. For class 2 and 3, just keep a lookout and we'll update you. But next year you will, if you're class 3, you will need the same rule would apply to you next year, and for class 2 the year after. Okay, and then the last would be class 1, which is sort of how we see changes implemented. Now, for class 4 devices, again, talking about the rule for UDI, I'm trying not to discuss the ISO 13485 because our understanding, and we're going to make the assumption that a lot of the foreign manufacturers are already up to date and current on their latest QMS systems and their latest 13485. So let's focus on this UDI system. So we understand it's for class 4 high-risk devices. Is it just for medical devices, or does it also apply to high-risk in vitro diagnostic devices? So, Mr. Choi, does it apply to class 4 in vitro diagnostic devices as well, or just
yes. This rule applies to class 4 in vitro diagnostics devices as well. IVDs in Korea fall under the medical devices law. So for that reason, so the IVD, the medical devices applies to this case.
Okay, got it. And so now let's get into the nitty-gritty details of how one would go about what information is required, and let's talk about this UDI code. So manufacturers in the US and EU, they have a UDI code, right? So we are required per FDA. There is a unique device identification code that has to go on the medical device label. Will foreign manufacturers have to obtain a new type of UDI through MFDS, or can they use their existing UDI that's already on their label?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, both US and Europe, the based manufacturers have their own UDI code on their devices. As long as those UDI code meet two basic requirements of MFDS, foreign manufacturers would be able to use their existing UDI code. At first, the UDI code must contain device identifier, DI, and production identifier, PI, in the UDI code. I would like to point out that the Class 1 device can have only the device identifier. However, the Class 2, 3, and 4 device must have both device identifier and production identifier. The third, if the UDI code does not include the DI and PI, then foreign manufacturers would need to obtain UDI code through MFDS and other Korean organizations.
So okay, so so that's good news that the UDI code can be used as long as it meets and complies with a couple rules that MFDS has. So one of the rules, if you understand correctly, is that the UDI code must contain a device identifier, or it's called DI, and also production identifier. So those two numbers and codes should be part of the UDI code. And you're also saying that Class 1 devices do not need to have a production identifier, just device identifier information is sufficient for Class 1 devices, but for 2, 3, 4, you must have both. And if you don't have both of these things, the device identifier number and the production identifier number, then in that case, one would need to work with MFDS to obtain a UDI code. Do you know how complex, how hard is it to get a UDI number from MFDS?
From MFDS, yes. Frankly speaking, the MFDS is not a kind of generating UDI code system. There's some other Korean authorization.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But in other industries, the Korean manufacturers have their own UDI system, a UDI code, such as the numeric or alphabetic or the barcode type, and to generate the new UDI system, and manufacturers have to apply to the new UDI code system to the related authorization. So I'm sorry to tell you, but I cannot define the exact the name of the organization, but most as I know, most of the manufacturers, except for the medical devices company, and have used the kind of the service, and they they are using the system
to obtain. So it's not MFDS.
to obtain the UDI system.
Got it. It's a third party, and so you can work with them to get a UDI system in place.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So this online system that we're talking about, again, for UDI, who can access it? Because, you know, our attendees, everyone's a foreign manufacturer. Can they access the system? Who has permission to access the system to input this data?
Yes. The online system will be accessible to only authorized representatives and authorized importers. Foreign manufacturers would not be able to access to on their own without their authorized agent or representative. So this is only for the local companies in Korea, manufacturers and importers.
Okay, so only authorized agents can access it to foreign manufacturers.
Yes, of course.
Right, okay. So, and importers, of course, or unless you are a local company, then you would have access to it. But if you're outside of Korea, you will not have access to the system.
Yes.
Okay. And how long is it expected to take, this process would take? How long can we estimate? Is it a quick process to just enter and submit this information?
Yes. Frankly, it depends on the number of the items that the companies have. But the process to enter the UDI code system, the internet system, information is a quick activity, should not take long. So I think if the medical devices company does not have numerous items, and it'll take within 1 hour, 1 week or 2 weeks, I think. But it depends on the situation of the companies.
Yeah, how many products they're importing and then.
Yes, how many company products that they have.
Okay, that makes sense. And what information needs to be inputted into the system? So what do the clients, what do the ARs need to do so that the clients, the manufacturers are also aware as to what information is being added to the system?
Yes, before products are imported into Korea, client authorized agent or importer must log into the system and fill out the required information about a product. The following information is required: the first, UDI code, and second, the model number, the third, lot number, and fourth, the additional product information.
Okay, and so one has to actually manually enter all this information for all the packaging, all the everything that's being coming through the customs.
Yes.
And the customs is reviewing this information, I imagine, not really MFDS. So what happens if this step is not taken, right? So this just went into effect. Let's say now clients are shipping their products to Korea. How will foreign manufacturers be impacted if they were to by mistake miss this step?
Yes, if the information is not uploaded to the online system prior to importation, then the first and the importer will be suspended their sales for a month. And second, there will be a fine, a million won, which is equivalent to 1,000 US dollars. And the product will be held at the customs. That's it.
Okay, so the impact's quite significant. I mean, this is a customs issue product, and then the fine, it's $1,000. Not, I mean, it's hefty, but even with the fine, it's the fact that, so you're saying that MFDS can suspend sales for 1 month if they do wish to do that to the client. Okay. And so what is the best way to prepare for this change? How should manufacturers prepare for this? What can they do on their end?
Yes. Foreign manufacturers must have a conversation about this new rule with their authorized local representative and importers. As I mentioned it earlier, failure to submit this information in the online system would lead to issues during importation.
Okay. So that's okay. So the best thing, I mean, I guess they don't have much control because they cannot technically access the system themselves. Sitting in the US or Europe, you have to be in the EU. So the best thing is to have that communication with the local agents to make sure they're also aligned with this change and they have all the information they need to submit into this online system. Any tips? We always ask this of our experts. Do you have any tips for foreign manufacturers on how to navigate the approval process? What's the best way to go around navigate Korean MFDS?
Navigate. Yes. I think every country has its own ways to do that, and MFDS offers several pathways for approval. I would highly recommend that the foreign manufacturers work with local agents or consultants to obtain help with a registration process. And missed or incorrect information can cause significant delays for the client. So it's very critical for the client to select the local companies who are very competent. They have a very long history and very successful history. And it's very important.
So we have received a bunch of questions, and some are related to specific types of products. If you're not able to answer them now, perhaps maybe if you could look up this information for us and then we can relay it back to clients, that would be great. So a question around the new requirement for ISO 13485, the 2016. The question is, does the foreign manufacturer, so does this ISO 13485 certificate, does it have to be certified by the Korean body or MFDS, or can it be accepted, or will MFDS accept the certification by other certification bodies in the EU and the US, let's say, SGS in UK, so notified bodies in Europe that are certifying and giving certification of this QMS, or even if you have ISO 13485 certified ISO 13485, do you still need to get recertification through the Korean FDA?
Yes, this is very separate with the existing certification in Europe and USA, and in Korea, and all of the manufacturers and importers have to follow the Korean medical devices law and follow the Korean GMP, KGMP. So if someone wanted to import or manufacture their medical devices in Korea, they have to obtain the certification of KGMP.
Okay, so they will not accept European certification. You have to get it recertified.
Yes, this is separated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, question around UDI code now. Not sure if you would be able to answer this, but to which, so they're talking about the packaging level of, you know, where should this UDI code apply? Does it have to be both the HRI as barcode, or, you know, to which packaging level does the UDI code apply? Do you, if not, maybe perhaps you can research this and get back to us, and we can get back to the client.
I'm sorry.
So the packaging level, so you know the shipping packaging comes, so to which levels should the UDI code be applied to in packaging?
Which level UDI code? Yeah, there's some kind of the standard from MFDS, and there's some kind of measurement information. I will get back to the
yeah,
members.
and I'll email you. We'll email you this question so that you can look into it in more detail.
Yes, in more detail.
Yeah, and so they just, so the clarification on ISO 13485, so they want to just clarify that the new ISO 13485 2016 requirement does not replace the KGMP requirement. Is that correct? Or does it replace it? It does not replace it. Which one is it? Does it replace? So again, the question is the new ISO 13485, the 2016 requirement, does it replace the KGMP's requirement, or does it not replace the KGMP requirement?
Yes, does it replace it, but as I know, the ISO certification system can cover the whole KGMP requirement, but
it does not replace it.
It does not replace. Yes, okay. the companies have to obtain the KGMP certification.
Okay. Question about products that are considered drugs like hemostats. So the question is that certain drugs, the understanding of the client is that certain drugs such as hemostats are being reclassified as medical devices. Are you aware of this? Have you heard anything about these types of products that are sort of borderline, which may have been classified as drugs but are now reclassified as medical devices? Is this something you can comment on?
So I don't know. I can understand what you just mentioned about that. And do you mean it's a kind of drug-coated medical devices? Drug-coated stent or
not the stent
like that?
These are considered, so they'll have some sort of a, you know, live tissue in it, right? So we're talking about the borderline sort of biological type of products, tissue products. These
tissue product?
Yeah. So these tissue products, now they have been classified as drugs, but there are talks about the fact that these may be reclassified as medical devices. Are you aware?
No. It does not classify as medical devices. This is it's their own the category, and as I know, is applicable to the human tissue.
So
there's a category in Korea. This is kind of a category from MFDS.
Okay, so MFDS has its own category because, you know, such as gelatin sponges and products like this. So, you know, because in different countries, in some countries like Europe, they're classified as medical devices, but then they're classified as drugs in South Korea. So the question is there any chance of reclassification of these products to medical devices? And you're saying you have not heard of anything like that with MFDS. Or have you heard anything about, but you're saying there's a whole classification of tissue products within MFDS. Is that, so there's a category of tissue products that MFDS has? Okay, which has its own regulatory pathway?
Yes, there's own regulatory pathway. And to import, if some person wanted to import introduce in Korea, and they have to establish the tissue bank and have a on-site audit. They have to have an on-site audit in Korea. The MFDS will go out for checking the company.
Sure. So these are, you know, what we're talking about are not tissue products, and I apologize, I'm confusing probably the audience as well. I think there is an array of products that are borderline. Sometimes it's, you know, sometimes they're tissue products, sometimes they're not, but sometimes they're still considered classified as drugs and in other countries medical devices. And to our viewers, you know, this is something that as RegDesk we can certainly certainly clarify this for you.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah.
And this is a very this is borderline product. So the people wanted to import or produce the kind of item, and the first step is to ask so this device, what type of the device this kind of device will be applicable to medical devices or a drug. There's a system, and there's a MFDS system, and the people can ask a question to MFDS. What it belongs to the drug or medical devices, and then the client start their
process,
the project in Korea, and then there's some kind of in other words, there's a kind of that feedback system in Korea from MFDS.
Okay, so that's good to know. And we haven't answered a lot of the questions. Our apologies for that. We've run out of time, but we can certainly, if you can email us the questions, we can certainly provide clarity, and we'll provide clarity on hemostat type products. So we'll answer that. I know that we didn't get around to really specifically answering that, but thank you again, everyone, for chiming in, and hopefully you obtain some clarity on what's changing as of this month. And as I said, any specific questions, which there are a bunch, please, if you can email those to us, it's at desk@regdesk.co. If you email those questions to us, we will get back to you individually and address your question and provide clarity. Once again, thank you, Mr. Choi, for
Thank you very much.
I know it's pretty late at night for you, so thank you very much, and thanks everyone, and we'll see you all hopefully next month with our next webinar, and we'll share the next month's topic with you shortly. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much.